Thank you very much for coming here. Very turbulent time, one way, but from other hand, we have habit of it, and I know that Georgia survived very complicated situations, but we will survive now and we will go stronger further. It's not just words. I learned from history, I learned from our own examples and so on. And I think story of Georgian National Museum in some way is a story of modern Georgia too, on one hand. We are following what environment what changed. We did, Natia mentioned big achievements, but there were not just achievements, were mistakes, of course. There are challenges. Last years were very challenging, but challenges are helping, And I'm always thinking that you should always find solutions than complaining, right? And in our case, we are a strong team, I would say, and Natia mentioned one, but you can see it different. And Lana started to work in museum, Nino, Sanadiradze, Darejan, and there are many others. So in some way, we try to create, maybe this is to a strong word brand, but from other hand, this is something more than just to have the classical museum. And when it happened, I will say a little bit on the story. It happened that after collapse of Soviet system, we had many changes, and it's usually changes starts in economy, politics, diplomacy, military issues, but not much in cultural institutions. And I think this was one of the challenges when we started to create it is new. I would say it's a process of creating new, not new, I think, more efficient way of institutions. All we who are under this umbrella and trying to build it, and I will use several times this word, we are more approaching for networks than just this vertical management. I think this vertical management in some way, I think it has been approached, and it's not this for our type of countries. So just to start, why we need museums, how it was created. Of course, number one always, and particularly national museums, it of course depends on resources, which kind of story you are building. Of course, I will not talk today on all technical details and of brand books and logos and all things. I think all you know technical issues of how museums works. The question is how you are approaching challenges and where you can find new solutions and who could be your partners. So when I am talking about network, future is just network. And system, the world is also, if you will look on, from biological point of view, you will see everything is on networks. Even cells are networks and everything is networks. So how we can bring this approach in institutions? This is for me as evolutionary biologist and someone from science is that I think this is way, and I will try to show examples why we are doing it. And plus, of course, number one is what is our resources. So you heard Georgia, some of them you have been here, and I'm sure you will go from here, will remember, right? Georgia, what I would say, it's always interesting. What you saw yesterday, today shows that it's never boring, number one. And I'm happy to say that I'm part of it. But always you are looking on your geographic position. And one way, you see, we want to understand, we are always saying we want to understand present and future using past. Yes, but how you are doing, what you are learning from past, and how you are connected with modern situation. In this case, nature is very important always. And if you will look geographic position, you can see very often people are saying, oh, Georgia has a very complicated geographic position, terrible geopolitics, so on. But I think it's contrary. We have wonderful geographic position. We are on crossroad, one hand, and on crossroad, which started from very early periods, we call it paleobiogeography, and going to, as I mentioned, geopolitics or whatever. But this is where you are between these two seas. Here is Caucasus, and what it means that these water systems were one of the reasons why we have so diverse nature. So when you will go back, I think you should remember two messages. One, that in this small territory, you have very diverse environments, so big biodiversity, and you can see you will drive 1 hour from here, and you are in high mountains. In 2.5 hours, you are on a Black Sea, which is completely different environment than Eastern Georgia, and very close you can see deserts. So what it means, you see. So this is that we have the world is divided by different segments. One is the biodiversity hotspots. Hotspots usually first feeling is something happened terrible, right? Yeah, it's a hotspot for biodiversity, but also it's rich nature. And one of them is Caucasus. That is 35, 36. And you can see there are much larger territories than Caucasus. But what is uniqueness? What is uniqueness? When we are talking about the development, we are always searching what is your identity, what is your uniqueness. It's in biology, it's in business, in economy, everything, right? So our work was always, what is uniqueness in our case? How Georgia can be one way, part of peak, but simultaneously have uniqueness. Even in hotspot, we have uniqueness, and uniqueness is it's only hotspot where you are studying evolution. Because this is not just one moment. We could study different groups of animals going up to our ancestors from 10 million up to today. It means that this territory has importance for big questions of science. So we are trying, later I will go, we are trying to build a narrative around this point. How you can contribute and study big questions of science, in our case, in big questions of history, either natural history or humanity. And what can be your contribution? You understand that you could not be dominant, right? Bigger story happened in other parts of the world. But what is your role and what is your identity in this case? And another big point which you should take from Georgia, another message, is uninterrupted cultural story. So in this small territory, you can see you have all periods, archaeological periods. So one hand, may I say, big diversity, all natural zones in small territory, and then you have the uninterrupted cultural story. So combination, synergy of including this is medieval side. So this is around what we try to build our narrative, but a narrative which is both one to tell world why you are important, but simultaneously we are still in nation building, you know. We are a democratic country, we are trying to build nation, and it takes time, but it's also very important, and I would come to the point what already was said, role of museums, and in these new types or new maybe ways is, of course, to once more to to communicate values and how to do it, you see. And I think that we can do wonderful now virtual stories, and it's very easy to in today's life. But you always need real narratives based on science, and this is our goal. So to have all stories which I will present, they have strong science narrative, but it goes from this upstream whole way to downstream to get to the public. So, and of course when you need museum, and may I say with proud to say we are also National Museum one who helps to paves our way towards Europe. But it has long story. It has a story since 1852, and you know, well, may I say that when the Russian Empire, I mentioned, I think, the opening, that Russian Empire, had Caucasus was one of, may I say, mascota or whatever. So it was some way center. And it was center for not just for military interests, you know, but it was also for cultural centers. First museum, first library, first opera theater were created. Our one of buildings next to here, this, no, it's that direction, the National Art Gallery was Museum of Military Glory. So may I say that in some way the collections were coming from different periods, different places, and so our background is Museum of the Caucasus. It means that we have collections all over different parts of Caucasus, which we are housing, and I'm happy to say that many scholars today are coming from different parts, particularly from Northern Caucasus, and not just Northern Caucasus, to do research. So we preserve these collections, and it's an opportunity, of course, to develop the contents. So this was Caucasian Museum. You can see this approach of ethnographic collection, for example, and zoology. And I'm happy to say that we have all these collections and even cases. I don't know if you visited our biodiversity, and it's the same. So one hand, we have all this background, and then in Soviet time, we had many museums, institutions, you see. We had 300 institutes of research, I don't know, hundreds. I don't know, you know better maybe, how many museums we had in Soviet time. Hundreds, several hundreds, but not with real KPIs, may I say. They were museums for museums, maybe there were some of research. So what we created in 2003-04, this was idea to unify under one umbrella, but not just museums, also research centers. It's a some way plagiarization of Smithsonian Museum d'Histoire Naturelle French or Preußische Kulturbesitz. So the idea was how to position yourself. Was one hand I mentioned there were many changes, but not much in this field. So, and what was our role? Of course, we wanted to build a better museum, changing of this organization with big ambitions, you know, to have like Acropolis. We developed this museum street project with our colleagues from Germany, with Museum Island and so on. So it was a lot of, I think, emotions in 2004, maybe, big ideas. Not everything were possible to implement, but you know, if you have vision, idea, and project, one day it will happen. I want to tell all our young colleagues, never give up, one day it will come, and maybe during our next meeting, maybe in 1 or 2 years, I will show the projects which were hibernating now came back, you see. And that's why I'm still optimistic that we will do all these projects. So what we want to do, and you know, I like this word nexus, which we used, I don't know, many, first time maybe 10, 15 years ago, but this is exactly a philosophy. How we can be institution like smartphone. It's very ambitious one hand, but it's reality today. I remember once, it was 20 years ago, when first time digital photos were in National Geographic magazine, and they were very ironic, how digital photo can replace slides. But today you have in your cell phone same type of resolution. It means that you are developing technically, and it's possible to have in under one, maybe, core, these different functions. So this is this ambitious. And of course, we looked what was before, and on one hand, you want to look futurist, but we are completely anti-futurist in these ways. So this was our, from 2004 to start it. But you can't do anything without, you know, your collections. And when I mentioned about this, our encyclopedic collections, we have really from dinosaurs going to Pirosmani or Kakavadze, whatever. So, and, you know, and also this approach to have 19th century collection, but with new technology, this is another way, our approach in general. And when we are talking about collections and connection with public, And one of very successful, I would say, project is with public broadcast. We plagiarized also, it's from Neil MacGregor, 100 Objects Telling World History. But here we are, here on Georgian history. So public every weekend will learn about one object. So it's many of them from in different periods, but one of them, for example, is this one. Right? It's every periods, and we're telling, we published book will be another, but it's also ancient brand mark. So, see, we have brand signs around 2,000 years ago. So this was one way, with the way also explaining what is brand. You know, brand is commodity brand, we have institutional brand. But for us, what is number one, to develop, to be part of national brand index. And this is also a way how to make influence also on, may I say, decision makers, and how that you are not just a small group of scientists talking with each other, pontificating all the time, but how we can be useful in a big questions of nation. It's a very specific, you know, I imagine it's now several scientific article about how you can calculate national brand indexes, and I think the national museums, one overall, including with their network, exactly transforming heritage to make very strong contribution and influence. And I'm sure, you know, I don't know when it will happen. I told you already we went through difficult moments, sometimes up, sometimes down. Environment is changing. You are not always welcome with these big ideas, but I know it will work. And it will work and it will continue. And coming back to our contribution is how the collections and scientific stories can be multifaceted brand product. And this is one of the case which Nati already mentioned, which is part of my life, may I say, since 91 when I started work there with large team of Georgians and my foreign colleagues. And this is big question, a big question of science, that who are the first humans out of Africa? We know that in Africa you have first humans, but when they spread out, it was a big question. And this is one of the issues which is very interesting for public, you know. Nobody will tell that they are not interested in human evolution. Even in religious, you know, I had a pleasure honor to present talks in Vatican. So everyone is interested. The question is in which way they're looking on it. But anyway, so this is big question. And here it's also very close from Tbilisi. It's 1.5 hours under this medieval city. We found very early prehistoric traces of prehistoric culture. We have archaeological site. And this is time capsule. So it's a time capsule, not like Andy Warhol, right? But in reality, we have one episode where we can study from different aspects. And it just, I used once, I was giving a lecture in Pittsburgh, just an example, you see, that how, in this case, one small episode can tell big story. Big story with beautiful preservation, different fossils, and we are getting, and these 5 skulls, which has a big, as I told you, scientific importance. But how it can be useful, beside of illustration, in National Geographic or exhibits on, big exhibits on natural history or human evolution stories, showing the story of development, stone tools, and so on. And National Geographic, for example, they used this story many times as even cover stories and so on. So this is one where you are getting the scientific recognition starting from science, nature, and then going to National Geographic and so on, and getting this that now Georgia's cradle and first. But how this is, or one is recognition when you are in big discoveries. You are now when you are developing your brands, you have always partnership, right? And for people, it's very important to understand in which group, where you are. And when this discovery was part of 100 big discoveries in archaeology, you are not just, for in paleobiological scientific community, but you are together with Troya, the warriors from China, Pompeii, or, Tutankhamun and so on. So this strengthens this brand, right? And to continue, and when I was talking about, you see, cradle of West Europeans. So now it's a like stamp. And for us, it's also a strong marketing tool after starting from a small piece of bone to get to the point to be West European. And you see, you have a cover story, Science, New York Times, and so on. But let me come back how another options can be through these bones. This is one of our papers about one of skull who was no toothless. But this after it, the main topic was this is a compassion. So this is first traces of compassion, scientifically shown. And when I'm talking about, and also it's on New York Times and so on, but what I wanted to say, you see, for one small bone, from big scientific question, you are going to big humanities as you can communicate, including story of empathy, right? So it means maybe a little bit, too superficial, but if you are collecting all it, you are creating this trust what we need, reputation and trust forth, right? So one another example, site itself. So we are protecting, and I mentioned this Rolex Award. Rolex Award was exactly for it, that enterprise and initiatives in heritage. And what was it, beside of protection? Usually you have 3 levels of, and 3 functions of sites. You have a site, research, and interpretation. And we created it in one. Everything is in one. And you see, people can see archaeology, and you are now contributing beside of your borders of, your science, you are going to be question open science, which is today is one of the main slogan of general in science. So from humanities, from, may I say, Indiana Jones science, you are getting to big science. I will have no time today to speak about genetics, where you are going, proteomics, but all it helps you, and museums are controlling it. This is the question. All these big issues which happened, for example, last year, the Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology went to our colleague who is genetics, but studying past genetics. So what he is studying, this housed in our collection, small pieces of bones. And this is exactly why we are needing. How, in a different way, you can be, in this case, or top brands like Nobel Prizes, right? So, but you need to try. Plus, you see, if you will go here, exactly on the other side, you see graffiti. And this graffiti is our reconstruction of as Homo erectus. But it became symbol of Festival of Science and Innovation. So this is another position yourself in big story of society, that these bones beside of, so has many different facets and opportunities. And including, of course, combination working with brands like National Geographic, communicating for future. And now we will have another new museum there. So let's go to another point now. Another point is, which is already mentioned, is story of wine, cradle of wine. So when Georgians always think that we are cradle of wine, we want to be first wine, and in some way, if you will look it through now scientific and geographic perspective, and still positioning of our territory is position of a place where first civilizations occurred, right? Where first agriculture happened. If we will speak in big questions of science, of course I will skip Neanderthals, Acheulean, all this. Of course there were million years of the development, but we had a hunter-gatherer and we have then agriculture. And which is understandable for everyone. It's not just for a small group of scientists. And to be positioned in this, together with Mesopotamia, Near East, Caucasus, is showing it, or we try to show, this is part of this area. And even before this was the idea that earliest wine can be found in Georgia, only we were able, after this research, what I mentioned through the story of Fertile Crescent, and showing that we are part of Biggie. But you need evidence. You have always proposals by genetics, it's possible, but you need and archaeology in this case, and these finds, you see, in here, we identify residue which show that it was acidization of early story, and also with paleobotanic it showed it was domestication of grape. And then we published it in PNAS, American National Academy of Science. It's a very high-level interdisciplinary magazine. And what we'll end after, and where we presented all these results, we learned that now we're getting real recognition. Now in the world, it started after this exactly discovery, after these small pieces of ceramic which was housed in a museum, after this research, you are getting all this. Yeah, of course, we are snobs, we like name droppings, right? But it's good when you can see yourself in Guinness Book or CNN, but in this way. But still, may I say, this is one facet. Another is cultural facet. So how you are transforming it. And this message. One was biological discovery, which is important, but it doesn't change, it's not a new finding first DNA or penicillin all this way. It's important. But together with cultural story, and when I mentioned, you remember the beginning, we have uninterrupted cultural story. This is exactly which combines. And you see this exhibition we had in Georgia Cradle of Viticulture, also with our team. We did in Bordeaux, in this Cité du Vin, where we started the storytelling from 8,000 to Pirosmani and Yosseliani's movie. So this is an opportunity for country, for museum to be positioned and communicate. And this is a way. And then, of course, we use this exhibition and story also. Bolnisi, I don't know if you are going to Bolnisi Museum, which is one of our new museums where we have this storytelling. So this is example, but it's continuous. You see, this is a object which was part of this exhibition, and it's housed in one museum. Now it's in center of city, the symbol, and people are coming making photos. We created it. It was created by this piece of small sculpture which was in museum storage, which was found in Vani. And then you see it's a famous guy. You see, like graffiti which house next to you, and you are in city. So this is indirectly how you are using it. And let me repeat, it could happen only if you are housing objects right way, you are studying them, and then you can, if you will jump immediately to it, of course you will be blown up. So now how we can communicate it also higher decision makers. This is one of the now project which is in United States every year, called the Guino Forum, where the different aspects of wine is discussed, economy, geography, of course, story. We had last year this presentation in Washington, D.C. But what is important, after this article, you see it's a growth of wine export, of Georgian wine. So you need to identify these points. Not to say that we need just charity our institutions. We are contributors. We are contributors in nation building, in economy, and so on. That's a case. So another, I don't know if I still have time, if you are not bored, but I have some. You can stop me or ask me. So going to the brands, right, and you have, who is creating brands, right? I think one of the biggest brand creators were ancient Greeks, right? They were very powerful. Their mythology, if we will speak today about storytellers, right? It started, we were discussing from Lascaux, Rogerie, in the first hunter-gatherers, they were doing painting, telling story. But if we are talking about systematic storytelling, it's ancient Greece. And science is ancient Greece too, I think. So we're using it now. And you know, one of the most known in the world story is story of Medea, Jason, a story about Colchis. And you can read that what Strabon is writing about Colchis. And so, may I say, all we learned it from our childhood. I read it when I was a kid about all Greek mythology, and I knew that Colchis was promoted by not just Greek mythology. This Medea later became, you know, the symbol of theater, cinema, and so on. So here is brand, here is Colchis, here is story, and another big story. It's also, I will not talk today. I saw Nino and Misha Salome are here and other team members. We are making another new museum in mountains of Georgia. We're using Prometheus story. You know Prometheus, everyone knows Prometheus, but it was in Caucasus, right? So this is ancient stories which you can make reality. So coming back to Jason and Argonauts, how you can make myth today's reality. One is, you can't repeat it fully, but one is experiments, and one experiment was how this was a travel of famous voyager and writer, Irish writer, Tim Severin, who did it same way, technologically came from Greece to Caucasus to Phasis, so in Colchis. So showing that technically in Mycenaean time it was possible. And then, of course, you are using archaeological record. And we tried, and I think Georgian archaeology for years started to show this Golden Fleece story is not mythology. It has a real background. And how we worked in our case, we knew about it, and we developed own strategy. And first strategy was, beside of scientific community, to make international exhibitions. And this is small part of it. In 2007, we started from Berlin with Antike Sammlung, and we had in France, we had in Smithsonian, we had in New York, Getty's, Penaki in Greece. So we were very aggressive. We call it charm offensive, but we put it in minds that. So National Museum in some way was behind of it, but this story, and like Medea's gold, and it's very well known. And so this is an opportunity now for developing different directions, not just in treasury, which we have, but also the museum you will visit. And this is another example of, may I say, our vision, how you can develop networks. So when I mentioned about National Museum, there are 3 levels of museums. One are national in Tbilisi, and the idea is to have national history, national one day natural history. We have ethnographic museums, so national museums around subject. Then you have regional museums where you have multifunctional museums, which are telling both nature and science, and very strong platform for local development and, of course, science. And third are sites. And this is site museum, where you have one story, and if for regional museums you have a local clusters of development, economic, and I will use this example, for us educational and touristic clusters are one. you see. To use also this museum, in this case, to be also part of another cluster, but it's a science cluster. So one is connected with Mediterranean, other Black Sea and Mediterranean. It's from scientific point of view. So this is a new museum which is based on research which started in 19th century, and you know, this is discoveries from 1960s, and you see these objects, you see. These beautiful objects, one hand, which helped us to develop all what I mentioned, scientific issues. But what we are doing now, you see, you build a beautiful museum, you have visitors, you are getting these prizes and so on, all this. What's next? Of course, participation in different, like wine, right? We used it when was Georgian wine embargo, right? We said that, you know, Russians made embargo or Georgian wine in 2007. And then we said examples, oh, we were exporting 2,500 years ago already. So it's a, may I say, it's a not superficial marketing. It's always based on evidence. So this is what you are doing. But simultaneously, I mentioned that when you are developing your brands, of course you need partnership. When I mentioned National Geographic, for example, and I'm happy to say National Geographic Georgia, we were founder of it. This is which helps you and your partner. And one side needs itself, you know, one hand on here, but to be associated with big stories. And we use Pompeii, for example. There was a book, one as a Pompeii of Caucasus, it was published in France, but we brought exhibition of Pompeii, and around it, we were developing it. And one is what it was, I said before, also in previous slide, was that, of course, now it's not so efficient National Museum communication system due to some reasons, but it will come back. But we had very active, you know, all platforms and including public figures and so on. So, but coming back to issues, another exhibition we brought was Etruscan exhibition. And one is when you are using a storytelling, which is, everyone knows Etruscus, right? And we did with it. But what is aspect, and in our case, this was combination. And our curators, Salome is here, that try to put together, to create this dialogue, Colchis and Etruscan, and plus, may I say, we use it, you see, strengths it, and to bring in new questions, like, for example, genetics of Etruscan, which is new discovery, is very important for scientific view, but also we use it, how important in DNA is not biology, but cultural. See, excuse me, it's a little bit, maybe I'm jumping question to question, but you see, you should trust me, it works. It works, and it puts exactly to this main message. You have identity, but you are part of big. What we try to continue, and following it. And this is example, good example of it. And when we are making exactly for example, this one of the meeting we had there was Academia Europaea, and in fact I think you maybe will surprised what is Academia Europaea. These usually academics are these boring people with this pontification, and so why it is with marketing story. But this is exactly, academia needs new way of communication, but still keeping, and I think this dialogue, Academia Europaea and your committee, in some way is also the right approach for future. And here in Vane, we had this meeting and public lectures, completely different subjects, but for, and particularly for summer school students who were IT start-uppers. But they got it. So this is the approach, step by step, how in this case, we will call it museums or multifunctional center, to be strongly connected, or connected with every opportunity like this project. this is very interesting project already. It's a 12th year. This is very famous American writer and Pulitzer Prize winner. He's walking from, like first humans, from Africa to South America, but we are part of this project. And he has followers of millions when he is walking, right? So, and how we are, museum, and Arajan is here, they are involved in it, that this is a project transmitting observation and values. All his, may I say, voyages for, we call it slow journalism, but observing nature, heritage, and then use it for kids. And this is now a very big community all over the world of millions. Yes. And you are part of it, and not just simply, follower, right? You are bringing. And one of meetings were here, presentations were here, story was here. So this is a chance where we can go, and then, of course, using all this opportunity, this Medea's brand for dance or for different points. So this is question. And that is what to wrap up this Vani and Kolkhi story, how it can be economically important, and let me repeat this, education and touristic network. We are getting, particularly in many countries I know, now heritage is with tourism, right, in Egypt, in Syria, many countries. Of course it's normal, but if you will lose this academic meaning, it's just tourism, right? And that's why I think you can't, our approach is that you will, with mistakes you could not change with other mistakes. Let's find a way of communication and how to communicate and find a way of this touristic development, but to have your own approach. That's why this is still, these museums exactly communicates, when I was talking values, beside of these big values of empathy and compassion, but very pragmatic way of development. And of course it's good to get all these prizes, certificates to be used and to communicate now. This BBC World was recently on it and so on. So to make it story, so we showed that through our collections, we can tell a story of very early, connected with nature and biology, but connected with humans, big stage in human history, development, agriculture, then metal, and everywhere you have own places. So I will go. So next stage is in classical period, we have Roman period. It's a little bit different. I will not go details. I don't know, you are visiting Zalisa, this mosaic, but also we're developing it. What was role of Georgia in Roman Empire? What was in Greek world, Alexander Great, big world, and we show that Kolkhi has identity. It was part of big story. We're working on it and different, but still scientifically. I don't know if you know that the word Iberia, it's not just Spain. Another part was this Iberia, and we're working to show it right way with this is one of good example of the place from Iberia, the Caucasus. We are telling about this from this site, Zalisa, Dionys, gold, beautiful objects as always. But also what I want to say, how to bring it in museum. And this was one project we worked, archaeology and opera. And there is an opera of Handel, Radamisto, and story happened in Roman Empire and in Iberia. And we used it, and one is now a big star of it, opera star, Anita. But this is a question, you see, how you can connect completely, this one archaeological object and connect with opportunity to communicate. It's not new, you saw in Met, you can have opera inside of building. Nothing is new what we are saying. Everything, there are no ideas. The question is, what is the background and what are your cases? and how this case is based on the reality. One hand archaeology, and on the other hand opera of Handel, which can be used as another tool. Now I will go to last story. Last story, which is not least, of course, when Georgia is becoming Christian. And you know, in Georgia has a strong roots with Christianity, and church played very important role, our history, our beliefs, but how we could be in 21st century. This is challenging, and it's a very challenging issue, and what museums can play a role here, and what we can do, and which way, beside of good exhibitions of storytelling, how we got in 4th century, what is symbols of it, of different objects, how was it communicating Bible or big stories. This is one work. Building museums, and this is museum in Mestia, and if you will go in high mountains, where we have, you can see beautiful collections from manuscript to medieval icons. Here the message is, this is in some way island. It's like refugee, you know. I was talking that the beginning that how important is nature, because we in Western Georgia we still have plant refugees, but here you have cultural refugees, and in some way we can speak this is one of the islands of Byzantine cultures, or scientific point. And this museum also, this was one of EMEA nominants in this way. I'm very proud we have it. But what we can tell, beside of story, what we are doing next, you see. And with, you will see the storage is now better, beautiful, and now we have many public programs and so on. Public programs, and how we can now to be positioned in bigger story internationally too. Like, if I don't know how I convinced you, but these 3 stories, more or less, were part of big stories, right? And now how we can be part of in medieval story, right? Are is enough just with architecture, or just with manuscript, or icon? It's not enough. You have much more competitor. So what you can develop, what we can do, and suddenly in these years it happened that absolutely by chance I've been asked to be head of the science committee of one medieval big heritage project, and this is ongoing project. You are first, I'm telling, you see, but it's not yet, it's still in development. So this is a medieval city, medieval complex near Kutaisi Gelati, you see. It's a monastery from 12th century where our main king, David Builder, was housed. And what we know that this is, may I say, one of main places of Georgian identity. It was also some way, may I say, national heritage center. He was bringing different important icons which you couldn't say today in museums, manuscripts, which were housed there, and also it was place where he was then buried. There is a beautiful mosaic which has a very high level scientific. But what is in nutshell, and for us what now we are working on new master plan, is this building D, which was in former time academy. So it was 12th century center where we had not just theology, you had both. You had exact sciences, you had astronomy, you had mathematics, you had medicine, and we want to refurbish it. So our main message, beside of well-preserved, to create now in 21st century vision of 12th century, and to find, beside of small exhibition spaces with very elegant way, then public space and also lectural space, but dialogue, science and religious. So to showing that the religious and science in this case are not enemies. You can find a way of the synergy, and I think this is in today's society, it's a very important issue. Don't underestimate, because with fundamentalists you will never fight with another fundamentalist. This is our approach. And I think what we in future will think is not just immediate to bring remedies. I think it's important to create antidotes. And this is one of the antidotes for me. Another project which I hope we will develop is a new museum, which is already ready project, exactly for what? But that we're like David Builder in 12th century. State went to place of church, where was monastery, brought science and knowledge. And I think this is where we can contribute and continue. So this is, may I say, very big challenge, so maybe in society, but I think, and we already working several years on it, and it's only way what we can see. Now what to finish it, what we're doing, and we try to position our institution in different way. You see that our logo is on COP, and why I'm saying it. COP was, big meeting on climate, right? And we were only institution here. We're talking about this heritage science, not just protection of heritage, which was different meetings, culture, heritage, and so on. How study of heritage, this biocultural heritage, can be useful for big questions of science. How we are, when I mentioned this small example on paleogenetics, same is on paleoclimates. We are controlling in our objects informations which can be used for future. You know that there is nowhere there is climate changes. Now everybody accepts. But how you should be ready for it. And one direction is high end of science, and another coming back is communication and building new stories around it. So, and also now I want to mention, coming back, one example why we need to continue with our collections and so on. This is also new. It was even less than 2 weeks ago. So 3 weeks ago. Let me remind you, remember I mentioned that we were many times in National Geographic, and this is one of skull. It was cover story 2002. It was beautiful. Phase, change, world, etc. And after 22 years, what you can bring from it, right? You studied everything. But you see, it's the same one, and I don't know if you can see. This is very serious scientific article about, we studied, growth rates of these humans. Apes have different, humans have different, and you need how it's developed, when, we call it ontogenic. May I say, a lot of scientific slang. But what is here from here to here? Can you read it here? Here, this individual died 11 years ago. So we identified biologically. So first time in this whole story, we know exactly how old was individual. And now it's a wonderful opportunity, new marketing, to this guy. We know the age now, and maybe now we will rename first Zen generation and so on. So it's I'm not inventing issues. It's 2 weeks ago, and so this bone, which was giving one information, second, now it can be transformed, and you can see this reconstruction in museum. Or you already maybe saw it. Now can be transformed in new story, connecting public, bring, different generation, and to make one more attraction of the museum for it. Like maybe you heard name Lucy, this is same level of discoveries for us and so on. So that's it, what we'll continue. This I will keep for future, because when I saw this book with Nexus, we have one idea exactly about networks, maybe for next meeting, because museum. But how I should finish it. Everyone speaks about crisis. Crisis is everywhere. But let's think on different way. Maybe it's an opportunity. Let's try and develop this message in society. 1 year ago, Misha, when it was, last year? Last year, 2 years ago, we had a conference exactly on this. Crisis in heritage, blah, but look on opportunity. Let's try to look on opportunity, and I think you know all this. In Chinese hieroglyphs, danger and opportunity are the same. Maybe this can be philosophy, and museums can contribute it. And what are our keywords? Keywords are research, science, but literacy. Literacy is what we can communicate with values. And what I tried now today to present you, it's a stage. In future will be better museums, better development, new generations will do new ways. But we tried to be pioneer in this country in 2004. And as I told you, we are very good to learn from our mistakes, not to repeat it, But still go ahead, This is not just by words. This is main slogan we tried always to do. And if we want to develop, we need to develop curiosity. When people were often asking me, these first humans, which we found 1.8 million, why they came to Georgia from Africa? So nobody pushed them out, because they already have, I think, curiosity. Curiosity is what drives. And when you can see this in National Museum auditorium, you can see it can happen, right? Or my favorite picture, when you have line inside of museum. So that's our case. I hope I was not too long to speak. You are welcome to ask me any questions. And what I would like to stress, it's a process. And what we learned, you are never finishing anything. You are getting one stage and you are continuing. Same we're doing now. And this last case which I told you, it will take a few years, but it's challenging, and we have this ambition that Georgia can be case of it. Small case, which can be later, could be multiplied. Thank you.